Thank you for joining our presentation today. We're just coming up to time. We're going to pause for a couple of minutes this afternoon, because we've got quite a large audience joining. So we'll give everyone time to settle in and get ready for the webinar. So I'll hand over to James, who will go over the agenda for you before we start, and then I'll delve into the webinar for you as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Graham, and hi everyone. As Graham says, we're just waiting for the rest of our attendees to join us today. Today in our webinar, what we've got on the agenda, we'll be looking at what cyber insurance covers, the cyber threats. We'll be taking you through some real life examples of businesses seeking cyber insurance, as well as delving into the key requirements that insurers demand from a technology point of view. Just a bit of housekeeping as well. We will be posing a few questions throughout. We'll be popping a poll up once every so often, and we'd appreciate any responses you may have on that.
Okay, let's give it a little moment longer to 1 minute past, and then we'll start. So just give it a second, just so everyone can join. There's still quite a lot of people coming in still now. Okay, yeah, we'll start then. So thank you very much. Thank you this afternoon for joining our webinar. It's Assyrian Pam presenting this for you today, and we've got a subject around cyber insurance. Is it really worth it? My name's Graham Hawkey. I am a PAM specialist at Assyrian. Been working in the privileged access management space for sort of 8-9 years now in total. And I hand over to James, who'll introduce himself for you today and take the reins of the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Graham. So I'm James Nadal. I'm a technology writer with Assyrian, and I'm a former financial services journalist. So today, before we start, we'd like to give a little bit more information about us, about Assyrian. If you didn't know us before, Assyrian is a cyber security software provider. We specialise in privileged access management. And Graham, can you tell us a little bit more about Assyrian and the types of organisations we work with?
Excellent, thank you, James. Yeah, I work in the sales team at Assyrian, and I speak to a lot of customers over the last 6 years of working here as an organisation. So yeah, I've brought on board a number of organisations, lots of different customers. We work across all different industry sectors, so not particularly pigeonholed into any at all. We have quite a big presence in the NHS as well. We're a UK-based organisation that specialises in privileged access management, endpoint privilege management, and privilege automation. As you can see on the slide, we've also recently been awarded some software reviews medals. For this, we've had an extensive amount of our customers reviewed as part of this external process, and favoured very highly actually in the software reviews for our products. Thank you.
And just a little bit more about us before we move on. So we don't provide insurance cover. We don't partner with any organisation that does, and the information in today's webinar does not constitute advice. However, we do regularly speak to and partner with organisations who are dealing with challenges around obtaining a dedicated cyber insurance policy. So we're going to be talking today about their experiences and the knowledge that cyber insurance specialists have shared with us. And before we move on, we'd just like to throw out a quick question to everyone in the audience today. So we're going to pop a poll up onto your screen now, and we'd really appreciate if you could share your responses. Thank you. Just let people respond here. And thank you for your responses on that particular question. So 63% do have cyber insurance, and just 37% have said no. Thank you very much for that. So moving on, let's have a look at the threats. So there are a number of cyber incidents that could affect a business, but ransomware is arguably the biggest concern for most. As you'll see from the quote here from the British Insurance Brokers Association, it's one of the leading sources of claims. So Graham, I'm going to throw this over to you. Why is ransomware such a threat and such a problem?
Well, firstly, it's extremely common. If you look at one of the most recent security reports, the IBM security report around cost of breach that was released earlier this year, 95% of the businesses surveyed in that had been attacked at some point. So we can see that it's a very common thing that's going on. Ransomware is a massive danger because it's potentially looking to take out core critical infrastructure. And if it takes out core critical infrastructure like backups and things like that, systems that you're looking to really protect where that data resides, then there's obviously issues. As we've seen recently with some of the breaches in the news, data's been leaked externally, and then it's available on the internet, so you can tell and see things that are going on. The main driver for ransomware is not for leaking of the data, though. It's mainly for financial gain. That's from what I can see from the reports. So it's a financial move mostly.
And we've seen some big news stories this year. BBC British Airways boots were affected in one particular attack, and our own research has found that around 80% have reported being attacked, so a big problem. Moving on to look at what cyber insurance covers. So the cyber insurance policy can cover anything that happens after breach to pick up costs that you incur. It's fair to say that it's going to vary depending on the provider, and it's always important to examine those details of any policy that you are considering. However, we can break it down into 4 main areas. So firstly, traditional financial support. We're talking about third-party loss if you're sued by customers, for example, because of a virus transmission, it might be. Secondly, first-party costs, so costs related to the direct impact your business has suffered as a result of an incident, so maybe data recovery, hardware replacement, and so forth. Interesting one, instant response. So we know that an attack can happen really fast. In that situation, you need support instantly. So one of the aspects here is you may get a dedicated 24/7 hotline. That's one number to call if an attack happens, including an instant report manager or consultant who will kind of hold your hand through the event. It may also include access to a legal representative or a forensic investigation company or IT security consultant. In the case of ransomware, it may be that you have a ransom negotiator included as part of this. Another important point is that reputational damage is so key here in a cyber attack, and a PR consultant or crisis management unit may also be included in this instant cover that we're talking about. And the fourth point here, ransomware or cyber extortion cover. So typically that will provide for a reimbursement of the ransom amount demanded by the attacker and potentially consultants' fees that oversee that process. So moving on to look at insurers' key requirements, we know that there is a long list of key requirements that cyber insurers will look for when assessing whether to provide cover for an organisation. We haven't got time to go through all of those today, but we do have a handy guide you can download for free, which is on the handout section here. Hopefully you're about to see that. And we are going to have a look at some of the key ones here. So MFA or multi-factor authentication. IT teams must show that insurers they have MFA systems in place and that they're being used. Graham, I'm going to throw this one over to you. So protecting vendor and third-party access. Graham, why is it that insurers will look at third-party access? What's the problem that they're concerned by?
Yes, a good point actually. Third-party access, vendor access, supply chain access, all of the similar things. It's expanded somewhat over the last few years. Everyone has third-party access to their organisation, whether that's managed service or some sort of vendor doing work on systems, etc. But the problem is that it creates danger because you've now got people accessing from a different point. They're not internal to your organisation anymore. And it also actually includes remote workers as well, because a lot of people are remotely dispersed now. So thinking about people coming into your organisation which are not actually on site or on the premise. So they're connecting in from a third-party location, really. And it's all around making sure that you've got protection over those, especially if they are third-party or supply chain access or vendors, because they don't actually even work for your organization. So the way that they traditionally got access may need changing, because nowadays ransomware and things like that have become more popular over the last few years for attacks. Well, the traditional ways of accessing for third party haven't actually been changed. So there needs to be a lot of revision there about the way that they gain access and the control over compliance to the systems they need to administer for their jobs.
And another important point, insurers look at endpoint management. Graham, can you elaborate a bit about what endpoints are and why those are important?
Well, there's a couple of points here. We'll only touch on the privilege side because obviously EDR is part of cyber insurance requirements, but we come at it from an EPM perspective, which is endpoint privilege management, which is, and if you look at, again, the IBM security cost of breach report released earlier this year, the majority, well, the biggest attack vector is stolen credentials. Well, if you've got local administration credentials on an endpoint, it's a good point to start looking at removing those. So EPM will allow people to interact with applications, but not have any credentials stored on their endpoint or have access to any of those credentials anymore, which means they can't launch them to move around in the organization and gain access to critical systems to cause damage.
And very much a crucial one is privileged accounts and user admin. So we know from talking to cyber insurers ourselves recently that they are increasingly scrutinizing those privileged accounts and user admin. It's been cited as a key point for where claims are coming from. And Graham will shortly tell us a bit more as we go through our presentation about that particular aspect. So let's have a look at some organisations who have encountered cyber insurance and what they have relayed to us. So firstly, North Devon Council. I spoke to their tech analyst team quite recently, and they kindly provided us with a case study. Incidentally, you can check that out on our website. As you can see from the slides, North Devon Council was told specifically that they needed a privileged access management PAM solution. Paul, who heads up their team, said the level of detail for what cyber insurance requires now was quite shocking. So we'd be interested to know now, have you had a similar experience to North Devon Council? Have you had PAM mandated by an insurance company? So we're just going to drop another poll into the slides here. And if we'd definitely appreciate your input on this one, and we'll give you a few seconds to submit your answers, and thank you for that. Interesting responses so far. I can see quite a few people aren't sure. It's quite mixed, so about half are saying no, but yeah, there's a number that have been told, similar to Devon. And Graham, so that brings me on to what I was going to ask you next about, which is your experiences talking to organisations who come to you. What do customers, what do prospects, what do organisations you work with, what do they say about cyber insurance experience they've had?
It's a mixed bag, really. I think you've got some information there which we've just been through. Some providers are asking for, things that a massive level of detail around certain things, while others maybe not. It depends on the underwriters of the policies, I suppose, and it is changing a lot and becoming more stringent as we spoke. But most customers will be put in a position where if they're in a policy renewal process, they would have potentially not needed the products that they need this year from last year, and then they're told that they need to go out to market and look for certain criteria. PAM is one of them. Not in all cases, but a lot of insurance companies are now mandating it. And then basically they would come to us and start to look at different types of solutions that fit those requirements they have. And it's generally driven by a commercial side of things, to be honest with you. It comes down to cost. Usually, is it more expensive to deploy the tools, or is it more expensive to take the policy? So there is a weighing up there going on. And that also depends on the size of the organization as well.
Thanks for that, Graham. And we're going to talk a bit more about managing privileged accounts now. So a few questions that insurers might ask you in this area. So they might ask you, how is the business protecting privileged accounts and credentials? They may ask who has access to which systems, how and when are account credentials updated, and also are accounts removed as soon as there's a suspected breach or a member of staff leaves. And what we're going to do now is I'm just going to share this diagram here that Graham is going to take you through to explain in more detail how privileged access management works. Graham, over to you.
Thank you, James. So what we have here is a diagram of a typical type of Assyrian PAM third-party access deployment. You have a non-privileged user on the left-hand side. You have the hub in the middle, which is the PAM appliances that give access, and then you have privilege on the right-hand side. So Assyrian is all around granting privilege to people that require it, but only if they require it. So if they don't need it, they don't get it. Non-privileged users sign in through Assyrium, so they're coming in from an external perspective, could be a vendor or something like that. They will log in using the credentials they have, depending on the way that you've set it up. Could be local, could be something, some other types of integrations that we can do, but we can use all different types of accounts. That's kind of irrelevant at this stage. The multi-factor authentication is built in, so it's our own proprietary product that's built into ours, so you don't have to use an external source. Again, that meets the requirements for making sure that all third-party and remote accounts to your infrastructure have MFA enabled for privileged access. So that's a key point to make there. Once they've completed that process, they then would cross over a virtual air gap, which gives them access to the PAM appliance. Now, they only see the devices, the systems they're allowed to for their job function. So let's say they're allowed access to a backup, a core critical infrastructure backup system for their job. We've done a lot of initiatives around this for ransomware attacks. So they would click on the particular backup system they're allowed access to. We would inject the credentials or the password or keys, depending on what's being used for that session, into the target system. So the user is unaware of what that is, and it's being as long and complex as the end system can handle. There's obviously a pair of appliances here available for HA or disaster recovery, as you'd expect. And then the injection is made on the user's behalf into the target. That is where we then pick up an audit. So we've got a full audit trail of the user. We've got a full audit trail of a recording of what they've been doing on the sessions. And then we can define who should have access to what, where, when, and how. And that is pretty much how the privileged access management solution works for Assyrium to grant remote or third-party access to core critical infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Good explanation there. And I'd just like to throw one more question out to the audience, please, regarding the tools that you have in place, technology you have in place currently. So just going to pop one last question up for you should be able to see now, and we'll give you a little bit of time to submit your answers, and thank you in advance for those responses. You can see that probably about 50% is looking like I currently haven't got a PAM or EPM solutions. Interesting. Some people are not quite sure. Quite a mixed response with that one.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your responses on that. So we're going to move on now to look at the pros and cons. So of course, the title of the webinar is Cyber Insurance Worth It? Well, the obvious downside for cyber insurance is the increasing costs. We have seen premiums continue to rise, and it's likely it's going to get even more expensive. But Graham, what is the flip side of that? How much might it cost if you don't get cyber insurance?
Insurance is always going up, isn't it, across everything? So we expect that in every walk of life. But yeah, I think it will tail off. The cost of a breach has come down slightly from last year, and the more breaches and the more insurance there is, the more it will be contained, because that's the cost to the insurance company effectively, and they want to drive that cost down. But I think it really helps to standardize the requirements of a business to protect against cyber attacks and to make sure they have the right cyber hygiene in place for those type of attacks. So I think it's a good thing to have from my perspective, and I think that people should definitely look at the policies and look at the tool sets that are required to obtain those policies.
I guess one of the downsides that people do often reference is that cover is becoming more difficult to obtain. It sort of goes back to what we were saying earlier about these increasingly stringent requirements around security tools. So that list we were talking about earlier, that more details in our guides. And on the other side, I mean, Graham, would you say that, like I guess with a lot of insurance, it's that simple peace of mind to have that there as a backup?
Well, I look at this as the same type of, I mean, I look at compliance and cyber insurance a lot. So I see cyber insurance and compliance having a lot of crossover. We've been driven by compliance and audit for a long time now, but it hasn't made a massive difference in the way that things are protected, I would say. So having cyber insurance means that there's a stringent level of the technology, like the patching and vulnerability management. All of these things need to be kept up to a very high level to keep the policy in place. Now, if you look at some of the new compliance things coming out with NIS S2 and CAF and things like that coming out, These are all talking about things like third-party access, controlling access for people that need credentials, making sure the right people have access to the right devices and things for their job, making sure that you can audit what people are doing after they've done it. It all ties into compliance for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the school of thought, isn't there, that, I mean, obviously firms do need to prepare for the worst possible eventuality and mitigate those potentially massive damages that can be occurred if they suffer from a cyber attack. So that's obviously a big argument in favour of having the insurance. And there's the aspect of having an effective recovery plan in place, isn't there? And acquiring cyber insurance can be seen to be kind of a logical part of that. Would you agree with that?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, having that, and I would refer you to NCSC actually. Go and have a look at their cyber insurance guidance on there. It's really in depth, and it talks around the aids that are in place to help you recover from that particular attack. They're specialists that deal with it every day. That's their job. So having something that supports you like that, it is massively going to save the amount of money and time that it's going to take you to get your technology back online and get the business up and running again.
And there's another point on in terms of an upside. We kind of touched upon this earlier, but some policies may also help with remediation expenses. So that's kind of things like legal consultancy, important specialist support on PR for handling reputational damage, which is such a big thing, isn't it?
Very big.
And then on the other side again, some people have argued that it's become less likely to pay out and therefore is not worth buying in the first place. So we've looked at some of the pros and cons there. There's a lot to weigh up. I mean, the National Cyber Security Centre, which Graham just referenced there, where they say cyber insurance can help your organisation to get back on its feet, but it would not instantly solve all of your cyber security issues and will not prevent a cyber attack. Ultimately, the decision whether to purchase cyber insurance rests with each individual organisation and what is right for you. Some organisations might be looking at this as cyber insurance simply a cost of doing business, a box that has to be ticked to demonstrate to shareholders that all steps are being taken to protect the business to ensure resilience and continuity. But on the other side, organisations may decide the costs are simply too high, and instead of going for cyber insurance, they plough their resources into protection such as PAM, privileged access management. In the end, the choice is absolutely yours. So we've had a few questions popped on here to answer. A couple of those. So someone has asked them, what are the different types of policies? So we know that these usually break down into two types. The first one being pay on behalf. So that means the insurer will pay for all the costs on behalf of your organisation when an incident occurs. Right to indemnify is the other one. So that means if you suffer a loss, you have to foot the bill, pay all the costs. You then have to take the invoices to the insurer, and there's a chance, of course, the insurer may not pay. Another question here, one for Graham. You may want to continue this afterwards, Graham, but how much can you tell us on this? Someone has asked how much would a PAM solution cost?
That's a great question. We're licensed per target system device, so you can if you wanted to look at pricing and you've got project in scope or in scope for cyber insurance, let us know how many devices, systems you have in scope, and we can follow up with some pricing. It's priced in that way on a subscription basis. Thanks for your question.
So as Graham says, please do get in touch with him to continue today's conversation. I'm very happy to answer any more questions you may have about any of the subjects we covered today. The on-demand recording will be available. We'll send that out to you. Just a reminder as well that guide, that free guide, you can download that PDF here on the handout section. So thank you very much for attending today. We hope you found it useful, and we wish you a good day and say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.